we made it all up here, so we'll go ahead and get started. This panel is Protocol Wars, or Sharded Learnings. So I'm Karen Scarbrough. I'm going to moderate us through this panel on a discussion on tribalism versus collaboration and working together in the space. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll let y'all give a brief introduction of yourselves and what you're working on.
So my name is Asaf. I'm GM at Bancor Protocol. Basically, what we're working on is Liquidity Pools protocol, automated market making, improving the way that you can convert between any token on any system, and also converting between blockchains to blockchains. So move value from different blockchains one to another. At this point, we work on Ethereum and on EOS, and you can basically convert, we'll move value from ETH to EOS in a non-custodial way.
Hey everyone, my name is Illia. I'm co-founder at DeNier, and we are trying to really solve kind of across-the-board problems of how to build applications in this new way, open web, blockchain, Web3. Which means we're kind of building a lot of pieces from layer 1 to developer tooling to even, we actually launched the Open Web Collective, which is really helping people with bringing together their ideas, fundraising, and gaining traction for businesses on kind of top of the protocols.
James Ward, founder and chairman of ETC Labs. We do two things. The first is we have a core team managing the protocol for certain classic. The second, we are operating incubator, which support 25 projects a year. Those kind of projects are built on top of ETC.
I'm Danny Ryan. I work with the Ethereum Foundation on ETH2. We're building a scalable proof-of-stake infrastructure for the existing Ethereum and beyond.
We on? All right. I'm Josh Swihart. I work for a company called the Electric Coin Company. We invented and currently support zCash.
Great. So let's go ahead and dive into some questions here. The first is, how would you define true collaboration across protocols versus just participating in an open source environment? What does it look like to truly collaborate versus just looking at what each other's doing?
So, I do think that even just reading and looking and being aware is a form of collaboration because we're all informing each other and we're all building better systems because everyone's pushing the envelope. But if there is a distinction between just that, there is a lot of collaboration going on and some common elements across stack. For a good example is libp2p is a common P2P kind of infrastructure. So there's a range, but I wouldn't discount even just all being in the same environment, having some conversations together and sharing, having work be in the public.
So I was just going to say, I looked this up. I looked up the definition of collaboration before we started.
Good.
So I found two definitions. It says, one, the action of working with someone to produce or create something. And then two, traitorous cooperation with an enemy. So on the first one, it implies that you have to actually do something, right? Otherwise, it's just a conversation. So if you're not actually building something together, you're just conversing or maybe borrowing ideas.
So I actually think, so we've been running this Whiteboard series, which is a way to, where we interview actually other protocols, and then pretty much that creates a lot of collateral for those protocols on how they actually work. And in a way, this is a form of collaboration because, we and all the ecosystem is learning more of what is the trade-offs different people doing, what is the kind of pros and cons of different systems. And it actually also opens up a lot of conversations because from there, you're kind of starting to see where you have common things, where you have different things. We have conversations with the Ethereum Foundation. We have conversations with Web3, with all those folks. And at some point, there is some open source code that being worked on together, right? That's you start with you're learning about things, you're looking at it, as Danny was saying, and then you kind of at some point you see, oh, we're actually working on the same thing. and it is open source, so it doesn't actually make sense to do the same work twice. So let's like plug in and send PRs to each other, right? So like there's a progression there, and like the more we can open up kind of the top of the funnel for this, the more I think we can get at the end like common code basis and like more code that's been reviewed by everyone and more secure at the end.
I think at this point the ecosystem is too young and too small to have anything but collaboration. The situation is very, very simple, that you don't have enough audience and the technology is not mature enough to start competing against each other. If we don't work together, we will never be successful and succeed. And this is the end game here. We need to work together, we need to reach out, and we need to make sure that we know how to build better things together. Otherwise, we'll just left stranded aside, and the DeFi or the blockchain ecosystem will remain as small as it is now and almost irrelevant in the future. And this is something that no one wants to see happening.
I think it's all about whether you can, build a real product together and benefit the ecosystem. I think it's, more beyond kind of just, giving the fund and supporting some research project, or just give some formal announcement. It depends on whether, this kind of product or whatever you are building was benefiting the protocol or the users or the miners or whatever project in the ecosystem. If there's like a positive outcome and feedback, I think that's a good signal for the true cooperation.
But so it's nice to say that like we want everybody to work together on everything, and all of those folks are kind of good. We have different ideologies. We have different kind of core belief systems. We have different technology bents. And it sounds like a nightmare to try to get consensus among kind of all of these.
Well, it's not that we're looking for a consensus on everything we discuss, but if we look at Bancor and the ecosystem of automated market maker, there are quite a few competitors and quite a few ideas that are being thrown in the air. And we need to speak, and what we do in Bancor is we reach out and we speak to everyone and try and make sure that there is a valid solution, that technology is sound, and the protocols themselves provide the best solution possible. Because at the end of the game, if we don't do that as a team together, then again, as I said before, like the ecosystem is not strong and big enough to survive this like battle that we can have amongst each other.
Well, you're certainly all somewhat fighting for the same resources, the same participation. You want the users and developers to be on your platform and protocols and using them and helping you to make it better. But how do you balance the value of tribalism and bringing more people to participate versus, quote unquote, having the best technology and actually building the best product? So what's really the better proxy for influence? Is it the tribe or the technology?
Practically speaking.
I mean, it's a bit of both, because the technology sometimes represents the tribe, right? A lot of these different technologies have different design decisions, different kind of ethos on how they're developed, different how issuance is managed, how protocol upgrades are managed, and that actually does represent an ideology. Like the technology and the kind of the immediate pieces around it represent an ideology, and so a tribe thus also represents that ideology. The tribalism that's like aggressive and nasty on Twitter is different than like people being into a vision of reality that like a certain technology is trying to build.
And I mean, I think the benefit in this ecosystem is that people can actually be in multiple tribes, because we indeed don't know what trade-offs and kind of actually like governance structures that will work. So people can like look at all of this example and like participate in multiple ecosystems, and I think like more and more people becoming like more open to this in general, which like from our perspective, like we take obviously like some other set of trade-offs, and we also want to just test them. So really like we want a community that is interested in testing new ideas and new hypotheses, and then this actually can like one way or another propagate through the ecosystem, right? So like in a way you're kind of looking for like different type of people to join at different stages of the project as well, right? Like Ethereum is pretty mature. There's like very different type of people now who are participating versus maybe like people who were originally like starting when it was just an empty network. And the same is like with like new projects that are launching. The people who we want in the beginning are really people who will pave the wave, attract, be like pioneers into the kind of building new things, and then figuring out together with us what is a set of trade-offs that works, and then going forward, like maybe like the tribes or whatever will start like merging into or somehow dispersing as we figure out like in the few years ahead of us when these things actually work and we start attracting more mass market adoption. That's when we will have a very different community in general.
I think it's all about the finding a master to make the final decision. Because right now the problem is like there are like a lot of different voices, but everyone has his or her opinions. But it's very hard to reach out to agreement, which that kind of like discussion delay the process and delay the process of making great kind of technology progress. So it's all about like finding a ways to make the decisions and make it more efficient about what kind of things we should do, which kind of things we shouldn't do.
You started off saying like, is it tribe versus technology? And the way I look at it is more of a solution versus technology. So the way we see the ecosystem is that there is a problem and we want to find a solution. And there are a lot of different technological outlets that provides like a mean to that solution. And this is where I think sometimes we get caught up with the conversation that we have, like, for example, Ethereum, and we're here, and it's like the leading blockchain, but it's not the only blockchain sometimes, and it's not the only technological solution that provides this end result for what we're trying to solve. And we need to be open-minded in that sense, that we not just die hard for a specific technology provider or for specific like team of people, and more for the greater idea behind it of trying to find a solution to a problem.
Right. I think something that we can't discount, though, is that these systems they're cryptoeconomic systems, and they have security because they're valuable, and the tribe, and thus like the community and the network effect, and to an extent, tribe is maybe just a subset of the community and a subset of like the network effect of it. I think the tribe that we were speaking about is like this like vocal, aggressive entity tied to these communities. But like the community and the network effect is crucial for any of these technologies to actually be secure and to exist and do what they're supposed to do. And so like, we can't discount that network effects have to occur for these technologies. Even if you have a better technology, but you do not have a network effect, you don't have a cryptoeconomically secure system. So point being, we cannot discount that a tribe must be there to support like kind of a fundamental network of these things.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's just really the fact that sometimes we want to, maybe in my perspective, is to look at the greater picture, the bigger picture, to take a step back and have a look and see what's the best maybe technology for that solution. And you see a lot of technological partners here, and you see a lot of different blockchains that are being like built and emerged. And it's not necessarily this or that. And I agree, you need to be in a position and you need to develop your solution in the place where the tribe exists or the people exist, but it doesn't have to be a specific technology in and out in that sense.
So can you give an example that either your team or what you've seen in the space that's been your favorite example of cross-pollination, collaboration of research that you've seen produce a great movement forward for the entire ecosystem?
I mean, we're super excited to use libp2p. It's a protocol developed by Protocol Labs, which is kind of in conjunction with the Filecoin protocol. It's a protocol agnostic P2P stack that's very modular and pluggable. And us two kind of coalescing on this stack has brought in a lot more interest, and it's just becoming a genuinely robust solution that people are more and more taking off the shelf. There's many language implementations now, and it's been kind of a boon for us and just I think for the ecosystem in general. The broader, not even just Ethereum ecosystem.
So we're headed towards zCash, Ethereum interoperability, and it happened first through Istanbul. So Blake 2 precompile was added as a contract. So now you can have things like wrapped ZEC within Ethereum. And then that happens through kind of a series of relationships and trust and things that are built over time. And then the Ethereum community came together and said, yes, this would be fantastic. We want this in there. And this is not only good for zCash, but anybody that's using Equifax or Equihash can be supported within the protocol. And then there's a lot more kind of stuff that's coming with the Ethereum community as well.
I actually like WebAssembly because WebAssembly is not just technology coming from this ecosystem. It's coming from a wider ecosystem. There's actually a bigger community around it. And at the same time, like through the community of like protocols for smart contracts, we're all kind of starting to pretty much aggregate around this technology and both like what is the stacks to run it, what is the kind of things built up on top of it. This also like going forward may generate a lot more like cross-protocol code that can run across different platforms. So really just like trying to push together kind of unification around like programming model. And I think like that's been a really like good push forward on this and like removing sounds of tribalism on the, at least like, oh, my application will run here, not there, because like, oh, you have a different like execution environment.
I would like to say it would be Swarm, a project that was founded by Ethereum Foundation a few years ago, and we sponsored the project last year. I think distributed ledger is kind of a good solution to solve the scalability problem for most of the blockchains. So we are pretty excited about the project.
Excellent. So while we're talking about how we've collaborated, to flip it on its head a bit, are there any disqualifiers in this space that in the conversations of ideologies and like what we're trying to accomplish as a whole that you imagine that we shouldn't be collaborating in a particular area?
Yeah, I mean, so there are all kinds of places, right? Because not everybody's honest. Not everybody's trying to do things for the public good. In some cases, there's bad governments that want to fund blockchain development to be able to do bad things. And so, no, we shouldn't collaborate with everybody.
You always collaborate to a certain degree, right? It's like you're there, but you always worry that you might not follow the right person.
Well, so I think it's important to have like selfish collaboration. Like you have your view of the world and your ideology and what you want, and you can't solve all the stuff, and you're not going to coordinate all the stuff, and you're not going to lead all of the stuff, and so other people need to do their thing. But you're setting a path forward for what you're trying to do, and you engage other people that can help do what you want to do, and it's selfish, and it kind of works out because everybody's got their own lane.
I think the way we see the system is at this point that if we go back like 2 years ago, you needed to do everything from scratch, from A to Z, right? You needed to build everything from the node infrastructure to get the data from the blockchain up to the front end that existed. And now we see more and more people and companies are filling the gaps, and you can cooperate in creating the A to Z process that you don't own the whole process itself. So each one has its own like little piece of the process that they take. And this is like a more, I would say, mature ecosystem. And we're getting to the point that this exists. And then you start seeing more competition on the different plug and play like positions. So if you have someone who has node infrastructure, it used to be just Infura, or you created your own node, and now you have like a bunch of different companies competing on the same space to provide that same service, because more and more companies are using and utilizing these type of infrastructures because they don't need to build them themselves anymore.
Good. Well, on those lines too, how do you maintain like the clarity of your original vision versus inciting more collaboration and drawing more into the space and perhaps aligning with somebody who isn't exactly saying it the same way you are? How do you make sure that your original differentiator stays present and clear to your audience?
I mean, from our perspective, so like when we started, our goal was to figure out how to really make it usable across the stack for building blockchain applications, right? Like our team is coming from like building like systems and building applications, and we like had struggled pretty much to build. Like we saw that building on Ethereum would require building a full stack, and that's not how you build in the modern world. So there's no way this will attract developers from mass market. So like from this perspective, like what we really looking for is how can we like help this kind of end developer like you guys and everybody else to actually deploy and get usage on their products, right? And like from this perspective, it's kind of like the technology underneath and the platform is really like serving this purpose, not trying to like create differentiator per se, right? So this is like that's why we're more interested in like how do we promote kind of this bigger message of like open web across the board, not like specific technology stack is like the current one that everybody should use. And then from our perspective, we believe we can like at least try to aim for a better experience, and then even if we're working with people who are not building on us right now, we can learn from that experience and figure out what is missing and how to improve it, right?
So for us, we have a clear true north, right? So our mission is to empower everyone with economic freedom and opportunity, and we're doing that with a privacy-preserving digital currency, and that's what we're about, and that doesn't change, and it doesn't matter who we're partnering with, and if somebody wants a partner that isn't aligned with that, then it's probably not a good alignment, but we're not going to lose our true north.
I think a lot of application use cases will be chain agnostic, because to benefit their interest. I think that's totally reasonable. So what we are doing is try to be more comparable with other kind of infrastructure and protocols, and see whether we can help them to build on deploy on top of it. So that is our things we are working on, and cooperate with other protocols. For like a foundation kind of things like algorithm, like a POW, we won't change it.
And so more recently, we've seen $1 billion in DeFi, which is really exciting for everyone working in this environment. So how do you think going forward, really that major milestone and movement is going to be affected by collaborations between different teams and different environments?
I want to, because like we're not, zCash isn't really used in DeFi that much right now, but I would argue actually $1 billion, DeFi doesn't matter yet, because it's $1 billion of wealthy people's money locked up in something, and until the unbanked, until the people that we're trying to reach with this stuff can actually use this stuff, it doesn't matter.
That's a good point.
And so like I'm curious what kind of collaboration is happening in those kinds of contexts, not just kind of reaching out to the traditional people that we've already been reaching out to.
It is a milestone, okay? You need to keep that in mind. As I said before, it's still, the system is still an early age, right? Early stage. The DeFi is still like evolving and maturing. Yes, the goal eventually is to get to the unbanked and to get to the mass market, and $1 billion is not a big number, but it's still a milestone because 2 weeks ago and 2 months ago, it wasn't even close to that. So it is improving and we see more money coming in, but this is what we need to keep in mind eventually, I would say.
Who are you solving for? Like, who's your user?
I would say that I agree with you, but it's also difficult and probably arguably irresponsible to show up to the unbanked and be like, use these random tools we built. No one's used them yet. So, I think that the $1 billion milestone is like we're crossing this threshold into these things are usable. They're like increasingly working together and doing like interesting financial things. And many of them don't have like critical bugs in them anymore. So
but how do you know what the unbanked need?
I'm not saying I know what the unbanked need. I'm just saying that good luck showing up to the Unbanked and be like, no one's literally ever used this contract. There's no money that's ever been put up behind it. Maybe you should try it out.
So Bancor, in that sense, came from the unbanked. It came from a community currency perspective and ideology, and found a solution in crypto and in blockchain to provide tokenized economy that allows people to benefit from like community currency type of money that can be transferable and exchangeable at any given moment. This was the gist and idea behind it. As we evolved and we started developing into the ecosystem, yes, we've done tests and implementation in Kenya and different third world countries to see how these unbanked can actually access this type of technology. But there is still a gap. Unfortunately, and we know it all here in this room, there is a gap between the technology that we work on and the mass users that exist outside. The unbanked are still within that gap. They don't have that barrier, they don't have that access to that technology yet, so we cannot really approach these type of audiences yet, and we need to make sure that the technology is improving and that slowly we get to the same users that we're trying to get, but they're not going to be the first wave, unfortunately.
So
the
I
Unbanked needs
originally
private key management and transactions, like first and foremost. And private key management is not solved. That's what I think that's probably the biggest barrier to get this in people's hands.
So I originally from Ukraine, and most of the people there, one way or another, are unbanked, including me at some point, where I had $100 bills stored in, quote unquote under the pillow, because I would not trust storing it in any bank in Ukraine because it will default at any point. Right, and we just were in Argentina, same thing, right? People just collect dollar signs. And the question is why? Because dollar is actually a currency that everybody in a way trusts that it will be there for next reasonable period of time. And I totally agree with you, $1 billion in locked kind of finance assets is very little, because what it actually represents is less than 500 million or less of actual currency. Maker was $600-700 million only issues $100 million of DAI. This is very little. This means that if I want to pay my my teammates or whatever in DAI at reasonable scale, I will be moving market every time I'm buying $500,000 $1 million of DAI. Right? This is so little in comparison to how much money actually needed to really power the ecosystem, that we're not there. And I totally agree that the other side of this user experience is nightmare, right? I personally, I know exactly how everything works. I know exactly math that works underneath, right? I still don't want to use that half of the times, right? So really this is growing the ecosystem, growing the amount we can actually transfer without moving the market all the time, and solving end user experience is two really important problems.
I think DeFi is maybe not that important to zCash, to some of the protocol, but it matters to all of us. I think kind of ECC support DeFi a lot. We actually deploy, working on deploying DAI on top of a certain classic network. We think just imagine highly overall speaking, the cryptocurrency itself is finance, right? So building the product on top of the network and make the cryptocurrency useful is definitely the things we are aiming for and we are fighting for. So DeFi in long run it is very important for most of the protocol. And we think in the traditional finance industry we see so many kind of institutions didn't provide very good product and service to to the people don't have the access to this kind of product. For example, a lot of people in the poor region and areas, they don't have access to this kind of traditional finance product. So these kind of things that we are working on and to try to solve.
So to the point of whether or not we've really reached a massive milestone or not, do you think what we really need to move the space forward is building the tribe or building the technology, or how do you balance both? Because we say we want to reach more people, but is our technology ready? So what do you look for? How does that align with what you're looking to do?
So you guys, you're experiencing some stuff firsthand, right? But you've got to be in context to really kind of understand the challenges in context. So if there's no mesh network in a place that's disconnected, like how is this actually going to work, independent of the DeFi stuff that we're building, hopefully on top of it? And that's the kind of really interesting collaboration. Is not like DeFi project to DeFi project, but like core infrastructure to DeFi and how that fits within the context we're trying to reach.
I mean, I don't want to discount mesh networks, but like in most of the world right now, the internet is actually not bad. It's actually better, like internet in Ukraine and like many parts of like, South America and many parts of like Southeast Asia is actually better than in San Francisco most of the time. So, like I have 100 megabit internet, like 10 years ago in Ukraine, and we barely have this right now in Silicon Valley, like maybe like in few regions where there's like enough density for people, right? So I think like internet, even though it is an important problem, and like there's a lot of people actually trying to work on it because there's actually a huge incentive to bring in more people online, there's actually 3-4 billion people already online. That is like compared to like this ecosystem right now, we have a huge room to grow with people already online who are unbanked, who are like not using any, like applications outside of like Facebook right now, right? So this is like our really audience, and like figuring out what's a value prop for them. I think that's a main important thing.
But the broader thing is the infrastructure, and in some places it's not reliable, or if you're in a place that is censoring the internet and censoring what can happen, right? And we all know those places. Like, are we, and another, like OMI did some research in Venezuela, and I think what they found was that most people had old Android devices, like Android 7 or something, I don't know. But there's no wallets supported on those devices. Everybody's building for newer things. Nobody's building for the older things. And you don't know that unless you have folks in context. And so maybe I don't know, if there are researchers or folks like that can go into these contexts to help inform what you guys are building?
Listen, eventually you need to identify your audience, and this technology is cutting edge, right? You cannot educate the market with every single thing. You can't just bombard someone an unbanked user with new money, new technology, new devices, like everything new. You need to start step by step, and this is where DeFi is actually helping the system. It's helping the ecosystem to start pulling more users and getting more awareness into this ecosystem, into the technology. It's also kind of like stress testing the ecosystem, so helping it evolve and improve. And it's not ready yet. It's still in beta in that sense. But in the next couple of years, you'll get to a point where you can be big as big or even bigger than Google and Facebook, and the technology will be massively adopted, and you'll see it also evolving and rolling out in unbanked users and countries. But it's not ready yet. It's not there.
So I actually don't agree with that fully, because I think DeFi being important is not everything. There's a lot of other domains which both can like help us with adoption, like gaming being one of the kind of major like cases where you can actually create gaming already created interesting marketplaces around the world where people in like Philippines are playing World of Warcraft to mine some items to sell it to somebody in West in US for currency, for dollars, right?
In this case, the technology is not mature enough because you cannot really run a whole lot of games on this ecosystem at this point.
Yet.
I said yet. So I'm not.
Yeah. So, and there's like few others. So, like from our perspective, really, what we need to is empower more developers to build applications, right, and have clear business models there, so they can actually do the research and go out and find audiences and bring them in, right? Like, I don't think like protocol at this point will be yet. Like, if we go out and we say, hey, we're like a blockchain protocol, everybody's like, okay, what does that mean, like? So like we are not at the level. It's like if TCP/IP like committee would go to like end user and like, hey, so you want to send some packets around the world really fast? We have a routing mechanism for you, right? So we're like a little bit different at a different level. We need to empower more people who are like, hey, I'm solving this problem for you. You will get paid. You will receive money. You can send money across the board. You can avoid some of the censorship that right now you're under. All of those use cases are there. like I think we are getting to a place where like they are possible, and really we just need to empower those people to like and make sure they have business models. That's like dApp developers right now have very like poor business models overall, and like making sure they have it, and like we also kind of expand over just not just dApps but in general, like there's applications that don't need to be fully decentralized but rely on decentralized kind of parts to serve part of the value. Like making sure that this is clear, visible, communicated, attracts people who actually want to solve some of these problems. I think that's the kind of part we should be focused on a lot, on collaboration part for sure.
Great.
Especially if there's no business model, you can collaborate with ease.
Good. Well, I know we're coming up on time here, so if you have a 10-second soundbite that you'd like to leave the community here with on your thoughts of tribalism versus collaboration, we can go from there and wrap up.
Well, I have a shell, so we have two bounties which are connecting near with Ethereum. So we have an Ethereum bridge, which you can transfer all your DeFi and also call normal contracts as well. And we have an EVM execution environment, so you can actually run all your Solidity code on near. So really bridging some of this tribalism on technology side.
We just announced a partnership with Gitcoin, so if you guys are interested in building on top of, ETCs, happy to, talk to you guys, and also you can go to Gitcoin website and see, what we have there.
Tribalism is going to get us only so far, but we're building networks, and we need to kind of expand the scope of these networks and these users. So again, tribalism, being some core group of people that are very into technology. That's not the focus. I mean, that's a very important part of these communities, especially early days. But growing the network beyond the tribe is going to be where the real value and the real network effects are going to be brought in the next few years.
So there's something really cool happened within the zCash ecosystem that got finalized yesterday, and that's the long-term funding structure that aligns development work along with the users. There's a couple pieces in that and how that gets allocated, but there's a new grants fund that got created that's 8% of the total block rewards for zCash that will be launched with Network Activation 4 in November of later this year. So that will be a pool of money. Traditionally, ECC's worked on zCash. The foundation, zCash Foundation, has worked on it. Neither one of them are eligible to receive this funds. So it's a huge chunk of money for developers to be able to come up with ideas. We're starting to release things as well. Like we released an SDK for shielded wallets that's now available so that people can download and start to use that. So encourage you guys to check that stuff out.
So Liquidity Pools are the killer app at this point of DeFi. Bancor is at the core of it. We have a hackathon, $2,000 worth of prize, fork the codes and just make them even more greater than they are at the moment.
Great. Well, I want to thank all our panelists, and we'll wrap up from here. Thank you.